I'm going to hit the button,
Hit
sir.
the button. Did you hit the button?
Doug, I think we're live on Office Flash Friday.
All right.
Who are you? You're Doug, I said, right?
I'm Doug. You're Todd.
I am Todd, yes.
And
you're in Minneapolis.
And you're in St. Louis.
Yes. Well, welcome.
Same to everyone who is watching or watches it later or takes the Medium feed or does anything with the news we attempt to curate about the universe. I got some.
Yeah, that's what we do. We look at the news for the week, the new announcements, and we just talk about it.
Yeah, I read the stuff so you don't have to. Maybe like I read a lot of stuff and I'm like, nope, don't care. I got kind of one in case you missed it around.
Okay.
Around verifiable IDs, because I think it's going to be a thing that's coming, and we had some incremental announcements, but I think people are not paying enough attention to where we're going with the wallet concept and the verifiable IDs. This is like the third iteration in my career of this concept of distributed identities, but this one feels like it's going to stick based on the W3C sponsorship, and so I think we're gonna dive a little on that. I got some endpoint stuff, and then a little teams, because you know it's not a week without teams. Mostly around approvals. We're going to chat that up a little bit. What do you got?
I've got some Power Automate. I mean, it's my usual suspects. Got some Power Automate, got some Power Apps, got some Power BI, and I've even got like something that brings it all together. So
well, that's pretty nice.
Pretty cool.
I got my content up. Normally I'm at we start the video, but I got mine kind of ready to go. So there's no need to do a scene cut because we're already on it. Because that's like the pro level of production I'm capable of today. What you're looking at on screen is an announcement about securing unmanaged devices with Microsoft Defender Endpoint. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, as defenders, we know that 71% more likely to be infected on an unmanaged device. Okay, so if you don't have policy and control over something, it's more likely to be attacked. I'm gonna like die from not surprise, right? Of course that's the case on top of it. But it says, hey, look, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of these unmanaged devices out there that are in there for reasons. So how do we handle them from a hybrid standpoint for endpoint protection on top of it? And so the Defender endpoint team has some preview features on top of it for essentially allowing discovery, update, recommendation, command, and control over those. Now, there are some nuances to this. If you think about, well, okay, if they're disconnected, I don't have authoritative credentials, I don't have the so there's still work to be done, but the capabilities are now in the tool set in order to essentially get the agent down, or once you get the agent down, exert command and control. So you can do discovery, then you can either sneaker net it, or you can use other automation techniques in order to get it over it. So essentially, you're just getting security, command, control, and recommendation over things that are not fully managed. Which something is like historically we've been more about like we're gonna manage this thing, right? Sure. Not just put it under our sphere of observational control. And I would argue that that we are exerting some management around this, right? Because they can be onboarded to Defender for endpoints, allowing it to then have it. So essentially, you got an automated discovery, and you're like, we're maybe not going to exert the kind of controls that we would if it were, domain joined with a GPO or a full Intune management stack, and we're not going to have our certificate footprints down for authentication, dynamic user provisioning, so no Gina integration, stuff like that. But I mean, we don't need that. Could be a digital sign solution that is managed by somebody else, but you need to secure it or something like. There's a lot of things that this would apply to, so I think it's an interesting.
Well, this is reality.
Yeah, it's an interesting announcement on top of it, and they have a pretty good stuff on navigating your way through unmanaged devices. So they have some. They just released some blogs on top of that, which I thought were pretty well done. The guidance seems to be there as to how to do it for the capabilities that just got announced. And so here's the challenge on it. Here's the unmanaged discovery endpoint. So check it out. Here's how many devices, the onboarding, the device inventory, the onboarding, security recommendations, all that jazz. So I'm a fan of this work quite a bit.
Awesome. That's wonderful.
Okay. So the next one up was, I covered this a while back when we announced, I think it was like June of last year or something like that. We talked about our partnership with the W3C around things. And then we announced Azure ID verifiable credentials back at Ignite, right? There's some talk about it. And the public preview is now available on top of it. Yep. So in June 2020, they did the announcement, and so the Microsoft platform integration essentially has the issuer interface, right, for the sequence, because there's always these, parties, these, people wear these different roles, right? So there's an issuer, an end user wallet, and then consumption layer on top of it. But there's actually a pretty good set of assets and materials covering the concept of distributed identities, why you care about them, an introduction to them, like how they work from a decentralized identity standpoint, how our specific implementation of this standard works in regards to OpenID, self-issues, what ions are for, independent networks and stuff. So the terminology, the taxonomy, the technology that brings it, how the end user retains control, how these identities are consumed and governed is all covered within the verifiable credentials framework. So I guess what I'm saying is this is one of those things I'm assigning a little distributed homework. My opinion is you're going to see these. You're going to start to see them on RFPs. If you recall, we've pulled up before when I was sort of saying, hey, here's the announcements. How do you rationalize them against the federal ICAM architecture, the Identity, Credential, and Access Management architecture? We went through the whole reference architecture pattern.
Yep.
And one of those things is how do you govern distributed identity systems? How do you do issuance, revocation, the rest of those things? And I've sort of said to people, like, you got to have your frameworks for this. Well, this is a W3C standard that supports a portion of that rationalized estate that represented by the implementation of a NIST 853 approach through the federal Identity, Credential, and Access Management architecture is supported by the W3CC standards for distributed identity providers, and our verifiable credentials implementation of it is an example, an implementation of that reference architecture approach. Mm-hmm. Now, you're still going to need to map it against what you're doing, what your different providers who support it, but this one ain't going away. That's an opinion. But the rumbles are out there, right? Like I'm hearing from people. I'm one of the people who digs in on this stuff, so I always judge something by, like I'll comment on stuff either internally or like do quick little presentations or record something on this tech when it rolls out, and I toss it into the wind of Microsoft sometimes, right? But then you can tell when something starts to get searched because customers are asking, and people start to go to you like, hey, Doug, you did this video on this thing, right? So in the last 2 weeks, I've gotten 15 people reach out to me about the little snippet thing I did.
Oh my!
Which then therefore I was like, this week, and I was like, I wonder why. And it turned out there was an internal thing on top of it. But when they reached out, they're like, customers are starting to ask about this. So we're working out loud on this one. There's really no insider baseball that you need to come to a Doug to get. Like everything is out here. So verifiable credentials.
Very cool.
And all of the different acronyms and stuff like that. It's interesting because I think it's somewhere back. Is it right there? If you spot right there, there's a little like Novell NetWare 4, right? Mm-hmm. Which was Novell's eDirectory, which really broke open my career for doing distributed server management. And like when you could bring all of your servers into an object-oriented directory and do that, then Active Directory came along with Windows Server as an application platform and crushed Novell like a grape, right? Because it was all about building and serving applications to people, and identity became in. And we've then moved forward on identity with Azure ID, with moving forward with supporting different standards, right? And everything from our initial WSFED implementations to SAML, OpenID Connect, and you saw some OpenID constructs in that thing if you were paying attention on top of it. So this evolution just continues to move forward. The previous open network assertions around like global X500 identities tried to have too much central authority. So this is decentralized, which is probably why it's going to have some teeth. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
Distributed ownership standards that support increased security and distributed ownership. Now, what that means though is that audit complexity rises. Like there's some things. And so you got to get ready. All right, so enough of my punditing around the verifiable credentials, but I think it's worth a research project for you to understand where this is. So when one of these solutions comes across the bow or a regulatory body says they're going to use it on the far side, you're ready to be a participant in that fabric, because I think it cometh. So, all right. Okay, so anyway, we talked about the endpoint discovery and stuff. I'm going to shift entire context and go over to Microsoft Teams.
A little lighter of a topic.
Yeah, I think that's very, very fair. So, so the Where did I put? Oh yeah, here it is. So I was looking for the overview post. So we released a new approval features inside of Teams. Now I want to point out that this is an example of what we would call a Microsoft first-party application. So we're going to unpack this. I'm not just going to talk about the features. We're going to talk about what happens when an end user tries to deploy this. Because if you were a while ago, you and I covered, we were going to do a debate, which we still have to have on board, where we announced bulletins and milestones, which were two common data service-driven app deployments that deployed CDS instances and populated things. So we're past all of our March break, so we have to schedule our neutral observer council and get that debate done. And and the reason it came back at me today is I tried to deploy that milestones framework within Microsoft last week to do a shootout between the two solutions that I had built and the one that's inside of Microsoft. And I got blocked by our data loss prevention policies, which don't permit that connector to be established in a user provisioned environment. So it was like, wah, wah, like you can't do this. And I was like, first, I was bummed. Then I was happy because it just illustrated how far command and control has come. Right? Like, hey, Doug, this is an available service, but you can't provision it like that. Like, you got to go get some permissions and you got to, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it failed to deploy. And then I got an automated workflow notification which says, hey, we see you're trying to do this. Like, here's the approach you can take to do that. I was like, all right.
Lovely. That's
awesome.
It
wasn't perfect, but it was pretty damn good. Like, within, I'm kidding you not, like 10 minutes of the notice that says you're not allowed to do this, I got a coaching offer
That's great.
from MSIT saying, we noticed you just tried to do this and you probably saw this, which I had. It's like, and the reason we did that is because of this and this. And I was like, ooh, shiny. So we're going to unpack a little of those rules and what's getting provisioned as we go through this. But first, it's a pretty cool idea for an e-sign approval request. I mean, you should check out the approval template. You can create an approval request with a template on top of it. So like for whatever it is, right? Like new website, there's attachment capabilities, markdown support on top of it. You can approve a request inline, like directly within. So you get this like adaptive card interface right on top of it, right? So we're seeing these lovely little things on top of it. So I went, okay, this is a pretty cool example of an application template. But let's unpack it. When you go to do that, and you add apps into Teams, right? So you go through and you're saying you're going to do that stuff on top of it. There's the channel and chat and everything else. So these are the techniques for doing it. And you can see like the videos on deployment. But I went into this specific one and it says the approval app is available as a personal app to all Teams users. Truth. The app provides a simple way to bring auditing, compliance, accountability, and workflows to both structured and unstructured. Truth. But then it comes into, hey, look, what are the required permissions and licenses? And I went, okay, permission to create a Microsoft CDS instance, right? You have to have an account on the Power Automate endpoint.
Sure.
You have to have an administrator role in the target environment.
Which is a pretty big requirement.
Ding, 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 right? So this is one of those things where, hey, this is why it gives the whole list on top of it, how to disable it if you don't want to show it. So this is one of those things where Microsoft made the choice to allow people to deploy it, knowing it was kind of going to have, for many people like me, it was going to have a failed experience to implement a coaching workflow on the back end to how to add it, complete it. They didn't want to hide it, but they also couldn't support it directly. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Which, you might argue, well, I would love to have a dynamic provisioning workflow, which, by the way, you could stand up. You could stand up a provisioning service and you could do all that stuff. But this allowed it to remain in a very approachable manner with coaching. So I didn't find it at all bad. And it was all
it wasn't heavy-handed, but that was a UX experience that we chose to make.
Yeah, and it was config, not code, which I loved. Because it was all using nothing but out-of-the-box controls. Because if you wanted to go after something super sophisticated, you could obviously up the ante on this rather heavily. But it says, hey, look, and then here's how to put the approvals, how to set the retention policy, how to go through the auditing and stuff. So it does go through like how to deploy the approvals app fabric within it administratively, so then your users can have it. Make sense? So, but I liked how this one was fully unpacked example of an approval of a Teams app with CDS and all of the instrumentation around the deployment. So I was fascinated by it, and I was even more fascinated by it actually really did a nice job of full coverage, in my opinion, of the implications of it.
Very cool. That's awesome.
So there you go. The other Teams app like Bulletins and Milestones and the rest of the first-party Microsoft ones, as a rule, they seem to be following this pattern. Environment, common data service model, right?
Yep.
Permissioning certain sequences, right? Using adaptive card framework. I would say this: if you're not going to allow users to do it or build a process around it, then you should turn it off within your application catalog. Because otherwise, you're just going to have users trying to do something and getting the crash error without the coaching conversation. So I think that would be bad IT, in my opinion. So there you go. So that's my little lesson for the week. You can use the governance toolkits in order to trigger on top of these. You can coach people into it. You can pre-stage it. You can, there's a lot of options for this, but you should think about this.
And I found in the last, I guess year or so at Microsoft, we've done, the RIT has done a great job of providing these coaching moments, right? And allowing you to do something, right, that maybe they will tweak or adjust or maybe turn off later, but then saying, hey, I noticed you created this flow, right, in this environment with this connector. That's kind of not okay. You need to go do this.
I do that all the time. They're like, we're going to let you do it for a week, and then it's going to turn off automatically and go away. Yeah, no, we already turned it off. But if you want to apply and take this training class, then you can do it over here, right? So, love that. Love the coaching approach.
It's great. And honestly, thinking about it just as a human, right? The number of times where that's happened to me. I mean, it's happened to me in real life at Microsoft trying to do something, and it's like, hey, you need to get approved. Just click this thing, and here's why. And it's like, I'm not mad. Sure, I want to do the right thing. Yeah. Thank you for helping me.
I like coaching, to automated coaching, and if I need it, and what I also liked is they're like, here's how you can do it yourself, and here's how you can get some help. So they also said if you're self-service human, but if you're I'm confused, then it wasn't just wah, you're out of luck. So I liked it. I thought it was well handled.
User experience is important. Empathy is important. That's empathy, I think, in action.
I agree with you. So all right. So I'm gonna turn it over to you if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my topics are going to be a little less heady and just little maybe fun. So not that yours aren't fun. I'm just saying
I was a little more heavy lift philosophical this week. That was more.
No, I love it. We need to have both. This is a little more candy, I guess. Power Automate Desktop. So if you missed the announcement, Power Automate Desktop is a free tool. If you have Windows 10, go download it and play with it and start automating things on your local machine for free. So it's pretty cool. One of the things that this one is just this is some, I guess, quality of life stuff this month, I would say. Being able to, if you make changes in the portal, being able to refresh, there's a refresh button now in the console to reflect those changes. Being able to do a save as, because a lot of times, you're working on something, you want to start with one and you want to maybe use it as a template and do a save as. Some of the things we've done around copy and paste. This one is nice because if you've copied one of your actions that have some complex UI elements and things like that, those now come over with your paste. So this one is pretty important if you're doing a lot of things like that. Being able to do image-based recording based on things like OCR on the desktop, so extracting text from an image is now available. So that's pretty cool. And improved if you're doing anything with Java-based apps and applets. I haven't heard the word applet in a gajillion years. So are people still using applets? Is that a thing?
Well, me neither. Remember that was part of the old Java portal framework, wasn't it?
Yeah, applets.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. That brings me back to Silverstream and the original JBoss servers and stuff, right?
It's. I guess that's the whole thing around Power Automate is letting you automate things that are quite old.
All right, so do a comment or hit us up if you ever deployed Silverstream Java stuff. I
don't even know what Silverstream is. I'll be honest.
It's all right.
Never
it's
heard
all right.
Of it.
I'm just.
I know Silverlight, but I don't think
that's a different thing. I still have a T-shirt that says "I love Silverlight." It's one of my favorite running shirts. So.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Well, you can tell from my back wall my museum wall that I have all this stuff. So anyway.
Oh man, I love Silverlight. Cool. All right. So this one is awesome. I had a session with a customer this week around ALM and Power Platform. So this is a nice capability, being able to, in a first-class way, in the editor, do environment variables on your data sources and move that through like a dev test, QA, prod type of scenario. So you can see here's this GIF is kind of walking you through connecting up in the Power App Editor, like which of these SharePoint lists am I connecting to? So this is awesome, and really, again, just kind of shows the fit and finish around life cycle and in the low code no code environment, bring you some of that pro dev type of stuff. So really excited to see this in here as well. Okay, so if you've been working in Power BI and you haven't checked out Charticulator, I think it's probably time. Charticulator is
I have no idea what Charticulator is. I confess.
So Charticulator is if you're, think of it as the ability to really tweak to the nth degree of visualization inside of Power BI. I think it came out of Microsoft Research. And in the past, what you had to do, let me just pop this open. You could go to charticulator.com, and it was like an editor, and you could import and export your Charticulator file, and then you could import that file back into Power BI, and you'd have like a configured visual.
All right.
But now what you can do is you can do that right within Power BI. So here's here's some examples of things that can be created with Charticulator. So it's a really powerful visual editor tool: scatter plots, dot plots, chord diagrams, and really being able to tweak to the nth degree some really powerful visuals.
I will probably never do this, but I will enjoy the work of others.
Yeah, well, and you can also get because the configuration is done with files. You can also import someone else's.
That's my point.
Configuration. So this is the kind of thing where you may go spend hours, right, tweaking. Change that, and then you can share that work with others, right? So really powerful visualization tool. And this reminds me of the darn it, the TED Talk. Hans, you know the one, the famous scatter plot TED Talk.
Right.
Oh man, I should be shot. I can't remember his name. He's since passed away, but really powerful visuals in here. So Charticulator available now through AppSource. Very exciting. And go check that out. All right. Last but not least, I wasn't expecting this one. This is very cool. We've had for quite some time. I mean, my goodness, probably 3-4 years, at least in preview, a Power Apps visual for Power BI, where you can embed a Power App right inside Power BI and enable your users to do edit right in line and pass data context from inside and outside your Power App into the Power BI report. Well, now we've given you something similar inside of for Power Automate. So basically what this allows you to do is put a button on your report and pass data context to said button, so that when it is clicked, it will kick off a Power Automate flow passing the context.
Yeah, I loved this announcement. That was cool.
Yeah, no, this is great. Because I think to implement similar functionality previously, I think was maybe a little too complex. Like you either had to do something outside the Power Frame or the Power Platform, or you had to implement a Power App, maybe almost unnecessarily. So this kind of
adds actionability in the middle of it, like to act upon.
And lowers the complexity.
By the way,
right?
Rosling is who I think you were looking for, wasn't it?
Yes, Hans Rosling. Yes,
You're
thank
welcome.
you very much. It's a great. If you haven't watched that TED Talk, like just go watch it. It's a classic. Okay, so basically you drag the Power Automate visual on, add data to it, then you can attach that button to a flow, and then anytime that runs, you can see, let me open up this. So here's the trigger. The trigger ends up being a Power BI button clicked, and anytime that happens, you now have access to the data that is being passed to that button from your Power BI report.
You know what?
So in this example, you have some context information like user ID, username, user email, timestamp, all that kind of thing. But you also have, here's a field called Power BI data, region, right? So region is the field that is being passed from your report to the Power Automate flow. And then you can, in this example, someone's adding a SharePoint list.
May I make a suggestion?
So,
Can you imagine combining this with Office scripts?
oh man, that'd be hot.
Like with all the Excel automation stuff you could do, you could be like, just toss this over and.
Yeah, and I just love because there's, I mean, honestly, like Power BI kind of stands alone from Power Apps and Power Automate in some ways, but I love all of this glue between these tools, right? With the Power Apps connector and the Power Apps visual, and now this Power Automate visual is just awesome. And like I said, in this example, they're kind of showing how you can pass context from a report into a visual and go act upon it from Power.
I probably won't ever do it, but I think it'd be interesting to take like the OpenXML API stuff and actually generate a PowerPoint report based like, this is fascinating, generate me a report.
Oh.
And like have it do like a Cortex mine and produce a topic slide and generate the entire PowerPoint shell. Like, I would like a report on this, please, and just generate a shell.
That's a really that's a really good idea. Yeah.
I mean, it'd just be like, like shell it out and send it to me. Like, we saved it in your OneDrive, and here it is. Here's the data you highlight. That like you thought that was impactful, and so here's I don't know. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. The big one that's not there yet that I know that people will be able to do some really cool stuff with is right now in the preview, because this is just the first preview. User entered inputs are not available. So you can imagine
that would be
saying,
cool.
Okay, I want to click this button, but I also want the user to be able to type some stuff.
Yeah, that would be where my scenario would kick in, where I'd be like, 42.
What kind of PowerPoint do you want? Yeah, where do you want to put it? What name do you want? Right, whatever. Who knows? But obviously that's the plan, is to get it there.
If you could have just a little miniature form of some kind, just sort of submitted it along with, that'd be killer. You got to be careful of crossing over too many lines, but I think that's a fascinating one.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, I mean, that's about all I had this week. Some really
like
quality of life stuff, some neat stuff coming, but
we're like 2 minutes early. That's okay. There is some there's some interesting stuff coming. I'm looking forward to Build and seeing what they're going to do with the open sourcing of the Power Platform language at Build, because that got announced at Ignite, right? But I would imagine, and like the YAML stuff for the wrapper I'm fascinated to see like where, because you had some of the DevOps stuff and the things, whatever. But I mean, this is all coming together, right? Yep. And what I love is it's coming together openly. So I think it's fascinating what we're going to be able to compose and build and integrate.
And Build is next month.
I know.
It's in May. So check it out. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in 2022, but again, in 2021, we're virtual. It's going to be available to everybody. So that's
all exciting. I know is I'm always going to watch the amazing Abel Wang do his just he and Hanselman do their thing, right? So so talented.
Yeah, he got a new gig. He's working for Mark Rusinovich now.
Yeah. But still, they come together for the.
Oh, for sure.
It's just I don't think those two ever stop presenting together. I hope not. Right.
Nah,
so awesome.
It's always fun to see Scott Hanselman and Abel and all those guys. So.
Yeah, I like that they're open about the world, right? Like just kind of how they see it and everything else. So, all right. Well, and enough rambling. Go check out the verifiable ID stuff as an example of the upcoming W3C's distributed identity standard. Check out the endpoint protection stuff and start thinking about like your governance model and support model around the emerging CDS-driven applications that Microsoft's continuing to put a lot of first-party IP behind.
Think about how you can make that experience nice for your users.
Teams as a platform, I said it a while back, like you gotta stop thinking about Teams as an isolated thing, and a few weeks later, here comes another one of these down the track. Like, and we're gonna train and evangelize and educate and advertise all these integrated capabilities on top of Teams as a platform. So get ahead of that, because you need to. I mean, it's an application portfolio, and you need to get ahead of it.
Yep. I agree.
And then turn on these cool stuff over. Every time I see the what's the Windows 10, what do they call it now?
Permanent desktop?
Yeah. I'm like super excited, and I would also want to put wrappers and controls over who can have that feature. Sure. The security person in me's like, oh, right? So the end user productivity person in me goes, yay! So I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
I'm a very conflicted person when it comes to that functionality. I really am.
For sure, I get it. Makes sense.
And so the good news is there is the governance and control out there. So I guess my other thing on that would be that's amazingly powerful. You should make sure it's in the hands of the right people and no one else.
Right.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, Todd, it's 11 o'clock. We stalled until 30 minutes.
All right. Well, everyone have a great weekend. I hope it's beautiful wherever you are.
Yeah, same.